All right, guys. So the final warning for you, because I don't have any word, any single word about AI and technology in my presentation. So how does it sound to you? Is it, yeah? Is it all right? Okay. So let's go. A little over a year ago, I met up with my friend, Jan, with whom I love to discuss deep topics about technology, startups, and smart decision making. And he's always fun to talk with, but that special conversation was really incredible. After drinking a coffee together, I was driving him home when at one point he just said to me, "You know what? I'm going to start teaching my kids to play poker instead of chess." And my first reaction was, what the fuck? What the hell? And instead of asking him it all out loud, I just said, well, what do you mean by that? And he answered, because in fact, every decision we make in our business and life is a bet. And poker is more lifelike game when it comes to dealing with uncertainty. And it made me think. At that point, I had played poker maybe a few times in my life. I didn't pay much attention to it, but on that day, I decided to give it a try. And that's how I learned about the thinking in bets concept and Annie Duke, who spread it. And I began an experiment. I started applying this way of thinking to my professional and personal life. And over the next 20 minutes, I will tell you what lessons I've learned and how you can use it to make better and smarter decisions. But first, let's go back to 1988, to Las Vegas, where the World Series of Poker final was held. The World Series of Poker is for poker world what's World Cup for soccer, football fans. The main, most important event of the year. And the final was played by Johnny Chen and Eric Seidel against each other. And their final hand was dubbed the most iconic poker hand in history. You should know that the first 3 of 5 cards dealt to the table in Texas Hold'em poker are called the flop. And Johnny Chen, at this stage of the game, already had a hand called a straight. A straight has 5 cards of consecutive value that are not the same suit, and this is the 6th highest hand in Texas Hold'em poker. Eric Seidel had nothing at this point. And poker is a game that teaches us how to deal with unpredictability, uncertainty. And analyzing from the perspective of an observer what happened in 1988 in Las Vegas makes it even more clear. Because one player has a significant advantage over the other player at this stage of the game. However, one and the other do not have all the information to make decision with 100% probability and 100% certainty that this decision will lead to a good result. They can only make bets by assessing the probability. They have some information, but there's also a huge area of uncertainty and luck. And if we translate it to life and work in the startup ecosystem or venture capital industry, we find that the principles are very, very similar. A bet is a decision about an uncertain future, and most of decisions in our life, like career, relationship, or finances, are bets because the future is uncertain. So why not learn a few lessons from how others deal with uncertainty to make better decisions? And this particular game was not coincidentally dubbed the most iconic poker hand in history, and its result is not obvious. Both players made some decisions, but only decisions of one of them resulted in a good outcome. And we will return to how it ended in a few moments. But first, we need to understand what it means to make a good decision. If I were to ask you what was the best decision you've made in the last 5 years, most of you probably would list decisions that led to good result. For example, a pivot in a company may have led to finding product market fit, or a good investment in a company at the seed stage can result in startup collecting an A round and increasing its valuation, or maybe you decided to buy shares of a company that are worth 2 times more today. And these are all great decisions, right? But are you sure? Because what if a pivot in a company, instead of causing an influx of new customers and new users, caused remaining funds to burn and the end of the runway? Or maybe the startup you invested in didn't raise another round of funding and founders decided to quit. Or maybe the company whose shares you bought went bankrupt due to an outbreak of unexpected pandemic. In both cases, you made the same decisions with the same information. You analyzed each of them in the same way. The only difference is the result. And in our minds, the quality of the decision we make depends directly on the outcome. And it's a simplification, and people like simplifications because it's easier to understand the world this way. And maybe it is easier, but this picture, this image is not true, and certainly does not help us to improve our decision-making process. This cognitive error is called outcome bias or resulting bias, and it directly means judging the quality of the decision only through the lens of the outcome. It's like a story of a guy who drove home drunk and woke up safe. He thinks he's an excellent driver, but in fact, he's just a terrible decision maker with excellent luck. So let's go back to the example. An investor bought shares in a company in a travel industry, let's say, hoping that the company's excellent performance, financial performance, will lead to a value increase in the following months. But a few months later, the entire world was paralyzed due to a new unexpected pandemic, and all travel activities and tourism activities were halted. The company failed to cope with this situation, and its value fell by 90%. Sounds familiar? Yeah, some PTSD. Was the decision to invest in this company a good one? Well, between the decision and the outcome, there's actually something else, and we call it luck. And in this case, in this particular case, the investor certainly can say that he had a bad luck. However, luck or the lack of it in no way affects the quality of the decision. Instead, it has a huge impact on the result. And the world is even more complex because good decisions can lead to good results, but all it takes is just a little bit of bad luck, and the outcome could be disastrous. And at the same time, bad decisions with a little bit of luck will go unnoticed because they will lead to a good result and the good outcome. And this leads to another interesting phenomenon, that if someone we don't like makes a decision leading to a good outcome, it's much easier for us to attribute it to luck, right? At the same time, our decisions leading to a bad outcome are, we feel, due to bad luck. And from the point of view of analyzing our decision-making process, this is a dead end. This is a dead end. And the first lesson I've learned from treating decisions like bets was to separate the quality of the decision from the outcome, not to beat myself up if the result wasn't what I expected, and instead to look at what decision had the highest probability, this is very important, of leading to the expected outcome. It's probability and not 100% certainty, because nothing is certain. And when it became clear last year that one of our portfolio companies, portfolio startups, will fail in a pivot and had no chance of success, one of the first things I thought was, it was obvious. It was obvious. I should have predicted it. Or even later, I knew it would be like this from the beginning. A few months earlier, I was involved in a pivot. I was spending my time and energy believing that it will succeed. Did I really know at the beginning and from the beginning that there was no chance of success? If that were the case, why would I get involved at all? The truth is quite different. Trying to evaluate a decision in retrospect is extremely difficult. First, because of this resulting bias I've mentioned, and second, because we know a lot more after the outcome has occurred than we had known when the decision was made. And it's easy to confuse this knowledge we had when the decision was made with the knowledge we have after time, and it's called a hindsight bias, the tendency to believe that an outcome after it occurs was predictable or inevitable. And the second lesson I've learned is to always create something I called a knowledge snapshot at the time of the decision. That is to write down for myself, for my partners, what I know at the time of the decision, and to write down, in addition, all the scenarios that may follow the decision. And I do this using a decision-making tree. Sorry. yeah, decision-making tree. And in this tree, I'm creating many possible scenarios that may follow my decision after it actually occurs. And it's a big change from this linear thinking that there's just a decision and the outcome, and we are evaluating our decision only from the perspective of this one outcome. Instead, we consider many different scenarios that could occur after the decision. And if I had stayed with this mindset, with this thinking, I knew it would be like this from the beginning, it's very possible that I will transfer this way of thinking also to any further decision. Thinking, well, last time I should have predicted that the customer acquisition strategy is wrong, and now I won't make this mistake again. In fact, almost anything could have happened between the decision and its final result. And by drawing this tree, we actually visit many different scenarios, and we are visiting many different possible futures. And we are assessing which one would be the best for us. And if you don't believe that we live in a multiverse, this exercise could prove you that we actually do. In a moment, I will show you an example of a real tree that we've examined when already we had full knowledge that the startup will fail and we have to decide what to do next. This is a tree. It's very complicated. It's very complex. But on this tree, I'm drawing different scenarios that could happen depending on what decision is made. This is my multiverse after the decision. I draw more likely and less likely scenarios, since there will always be some kind of uncertainty and factor of a luck. None of those scenarios are 100% certain. But still, with this exercise, I can do two most important things. First of all, I can access which scenarios are the ones I would like to see occur. And secondly, I can assess which scenarios are most probable. And then I can consider how much risk I can take in a given situation, because as Morgan Housel said, risk is what's left over after you think you've thought of everything. And the same is true in poker. What is certain is our cards in hand and those on the table. Everything else is hidden from the player, is uncertain. And all decisions must be made in a situation of incomplete information. And decision-making tree works so well because it helps assess the probability of favorable outcome for us. And such a calculation is not simple because most of decisions in our life are complex. It's not like a coin toss where the probability of throwing tails or heads is always 50%. We have to somehow guess the probability of the scenario and then bet. But still, we are evaluating the results. So, what if the result is not good? Well, we are not right. We are wrong. And this is why people find it so difficult to guess and bet on a scenario, because they are afraid that they are not right. In fact, all decisions are not only 100% bad or good. In fact, they are always somewhere in between. And the third lesson I've learned about decision-making and what we can learn from poker players is that decision-making should always be a team discipline. Because decisions are based on beliefs and knowledge we have at the moment of the decision. And this is the exact case in venture capital industry and investing. The fund makes an investment decision based on various factors like team, market, product, business model and traction, or terms and conditions of the transaction. And the job of the fund is to gather as much information as possible on above aspects to inform the decision with actual data, not just a pure guesswork. And this information builds fund beliefs. Then there is factor of a luck and a risk. And at first we see that we have this risk associated with luck, and this is something we cannot actually control. It's independent of us. And once we realize that there is something that is independent of us and we don't have a control over everything, it's easy to blame a lack of luck for the lack of positive outcome. But the truth is once again a little more complex, because it turns out that there is also another risk we take much earlier. The first risk factor occurs before the decision is made. And I have a good news for you, because this is something we can actually control. We can actually influence. This is the risk associated with incomplete information. And we will never have 100% information at the moment of the decision to make a decision with 100% probability, but still we can do much, much more to move on this axis from here to there. It's very important. And this is why decision-making should be a team sport. By using the beliefs and information and knowledge of others, we can expand our range of information. We have more data to make decisions. It's like assembling an IKEA table with friends. One friend will read the instruction, another friend will hold the pieces together, third friend will tighten the screws, and of course it may take longer. Yeah. Maybe there will be a lot of arguing, but at least you won't end up with a table that looks like a Picasso. And we can make it even better. And the first prototype I have for you is that it's crucial, it's very important that there are people with different views, different from each other, involved in the decision-making process. This will make the range of the information for decision-making even wider. And the second tip is actually an exercise, because do you know how to make people involved in the decision-making process even better and at verifying their beliefs with actual information and data? You can use a simple wanna bet exercise. You can ask our colleagues if they would bet on the scenario they feel the more likely to occur at the moment of the decision. And making a bet, even a small one, on a cheap coffee from Starbucks, even though maybe the Starbucks coffee isn't that cheap, creates an additional external motivation to test your assumptions. And in VC industry, it shouldn't be the case because money is actually already involved on the table, and it shouldn't require any external additional motivation to test one's assumption, but still you can use this exercise. You can always get more information before making a decision, and this is crucial. Once the decision is made, the risk factor, the only risk factor that is left, will depend on luck. And so we have to close the feedback loop. We have to get the result and see what actually happened. And 2 years ago, I started to play golf, learning to play golf, and it's awfully hard to learn. Trust me. And the movement with the golf club is called a golf swing, this movement with a golf club. And during this movement, there are so many moving parts of the body involved that possibly everything can go wrong, you know? And the ball could fly into a very different direction than intended, very, very easily. What's really helpful in learning how to play golf is this hardware, this piece of hardware. It's called a swing X-ray. It provides an instant information, instant data for a player, instant feedback about carry distance, about club speed, about club angle, etc., etc. This feedback is immediate, and a few seconds later, a player can make some changes, strike again, and gets again the feedback. And this feedback loop is very, very fast. Allows you to react in real time to the mistakes that are made. And it's a little different in VC investing, you know, because exit from a startup, which will prove that the investment was a good decision, can take several years. So how then learn by analyzing the effects of the decisions in a VC industry, but not after several years? Is it even possible? Well, when it comes to making a decision about the investment, it's not simple yes or no. You saw those factors. We are evaluating them. We can divide them into smaller pieces. For example, product could be divided into value proposition, competitive advantages, development plan, customer feedback, etc. We can award points from 0 to 100 to each of those areas. And feedback as to whether our assessment at the moment of the decision is right or wrong comes very quickly, because the product is something that is developed continuously, all right? We don't have to wait until the exit to see if it's going in the right direction. And by observing those key indicators, we can assess and evaluate how are our decisions at the moment of the decision and investment. We get faster feedback. This way, we learn much faster, and we improve our decision-making process. And this leads to my final thought and my final lesson. In 1988, Johnny Chen, who had an advantage over Eric Seidel from the beginning, decided to play very conservatively. He didn't reveal that he had good cards aiming to provoke Eric. And Eric at one point decided to take a chance, and he bluffed. He bluffed his way into a very difficult situation by going all in. And Johnny Chen was just waiting for it. He checked Eric. And in a few moments, he picked up a check for 700K. And this is very different from our situation. And it's a good news for us. Because the last lesson I've learned is that business, unlike poker, isn't a zero-sum game. The victory of one fund, one team, one startup, one idea does not automatically mean the defeat of other. This is why improving our decision-making process, both in business and personal life, can serve the good for each of us individually and all of us as a collective. And in the venture capital industry, what's even more important, and this is my final lesson and final thought, is that sometimes the riskiest bet is not taking one at all. So let's make sure our decisions are bold. Thank you, guys. Thank you for today.
Thank you.